Meet The Lot, native token of Lukki Exchange and the most potential tool for investing this year. Trade now on P2B, B2B and Lukki.io.
Yes, the suspenders are here. Wow, what a room. I love you too. I'm the oldest guy in the room. I'm the oldest guy everywhere I go. Anyway, he said 50 years. I've been in the business 61 years. 7 decades. Started in 1957 at a small radio station in Miami. And so I've lived through this whole technology burst. When I started, it was a radio station in a local city, Miami, Florida. Then I went national I had local television, then national radio. And then CNN, of course, in that incredible story, was 26 years. Then I thought I could retire, and then along came the internet, and now I do a digital show on Aura TV. It's on RT, it's on Hulu, it's on YouTube, it's on everywhere. And so the internet has taken over. But basically, when you think about it, all I'm doing every day, and I still do it, is interview people. So I'm not doing anything differently. The world is different. The means of transmission is different. The whole ball of wax has changed. And it's unbelievable to think about it, that when I was on CNN, Ted Turner hired me. I said, is this thing going to work? You know, in a little studio in Washington. And he said it was going to work because we beam it up to a satellite. It goes up 22,000 miles, comes back down to explain that to Thomas Jefferson. Look what's happened in this world we live in. It's beyond belief to see the technological advances. And now we come to this session, which I will moderate with 4 gentlemen who know all about it. I'm learning all about it. I still don't know what it all means. I have a feeling it's going to be very big. I know the gear people that I'm involved with are very involved with it. Well, hi there.
Hey, Larry.
Are we still short a panelist?
No, we're rolling.
He's stuck in traffic in Toronto. He'll never be here.
It's right there.
Oh, there you go.
Hey guys, how are you? Larry?
Oh, he's here.
See ya. Charles?
Okay.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, Al.
So is someone else going to introduce them? Do we have a video to show first?
It was right played.
What?
It's right played, the video.
It played. You all saw it?
Yep.
Everyone saw the video. You sure it played? Okay. Mass influence and adoption of blockchain technology. Our panelists are Al Bergio, who's the CEO of Digital Bits. That's a blockchain platform that supports the tokenization and trading of digital assets like loyalty points. Al Bergio is here. Matt Rozak is the founder of Block, B-L-O-Q. Charles Hoskinson is the founder of IOHK. And Justin Wu is with Gear Blockchain. He's advisor to Gear Blockchain, also an influencer of blockchain. Okay, guys, what are we talking about? I'll start with, who's at the far end? Is that Charles? What? All right, start with you, Charles. You got the beard, you look smart. What are we talking? What is blockchain? Simply, I want to put this now for dumb guys like me.
Can everybody hear me? There we go. Okay, great. Hi, guys. Charles Hoskinson here. So to understand blockchain, the easiest way of understanding that is just looking at it as a natural continuation of the internet. You know, when I was a kid, I used to go to the library, and I go there, and information moves instantaneously anywhere. It costs nothing to move the information. So then people started asking, well, what else can we make move for free? And it turns out that money and finance, this is a very expensive, very heavy system. To do a wire transfer, it takes days. You have all these different marketplaces like exchanges and so forth, that you have securities like stock and bonds and commodities, and it's very expensive to trade these things and maintain these things. And people said in an age that you can send an email to anyone in the world, why can't I send money like email to anyone in the world? So that was kind of the invitation for digital money. The blockchain side of it was saying, well, if we're going to digitize all this stuff and make it move really fast, it's probably a really bad idea to centralize control to one party, because whoever controls that is going to be too big to fail, and it's going to cause all these problems. So instead, can we have it where it's controlled by everybody? It's decentralized. It's controlled at the edges, kind of like how the internet works or how BitTorrent works with file sharing or these types of things. So that's really what blockchain is all about.
It is money.
It can be money, it can be a commodity, it can be stock, and that's where our space is at, is we're starting to now explore those nuances. We started with this idea of, can we create something like the dollar or something like digital gold? And then we realized that there's no difference between that token trying to be gold and a token trying to be stock or a token trying to be a bond.
Al, what does digital bits do?
Well, we're focused on helping accelerate that adoption and doing that by really focused on one asset category to commence with, and that is loyalty and rewards. This is another digital asset that exists in a substantial majority of people's pockets. They may not be using them, but they have them. And really focused on helping enterprises that see this as a competitive advantage in the tokenization of their rewards points. And really, it's a way of bringing the masses to cryptocurrency versus cryptocurrency to the masses, and in helping accelerate and grow the market.
Was it about 10 years old, all of this?
Yeah,
I think the anniversary of Bitcoin will be on October, when Satoshi Nakamoto launched the white paper, will be October 31st. We'll be 10 years into the ball game. But I like what Al said about loyalty points, because these systems are taking like things like loyalty points and turning them into more of like a currency and creating these economies out of these new ways to think about loyalty and likes or retweets or kind of behavioral things like that. And I love this question about what is blockchain. Charles' answer was spot on, but I also like to almost delete the word blockchain in my head and just call them digital cooperatives. It's like, growing up, we would all go, and I guess in Canada, you guys had an Ace Hardware or a True Value, or you guys would have a Home Hardware, Canadian Tire or something, right? Yes. Anyway, so these were cooperatives, right? They would pool their purchases together, buy hammers and nails cheaper. And you're kind of replicating the same thing, these cooperatives, where you're all contributing something to a particular ecosystem, but it's burnished in code. And the more open those systems are, the more transparent they are, the more that you have confidence in contributing to that ecosystem. And then there's a token that's like the barometer of value. The more you contribute, the more people, a token will increase. And so that's kind of how I like to think about these digital cooperatives.
All right, now, Justin, gear supports the environment. How does that work in what we're talking about?
So in the topic of Bitcoin and blockchain, we know that mining is taking up a lot of resources and energy out there. And so what we want to do in the space is to kind of help clean that out and provide more sustainable and green energy resources to help with the proof of work systems. Obviously with Cardano, there's like proof of stake that's coming out, but we do acknowledge that proof of work systems and proof of work coins will continue to exist. And what we want to do in regards to like mass adoption, we see that mining is always getting kind of like a bad rap out there, where everybody's saying that it's consuming more and more energy. And so what we want to do is to both help clean that out, but also start to fund privately other green and sustainable projects and startups out there, whether they're blockchain or not blockchain too.
So it is profitable and helpful.
Sorry, can you repeat
Right,
that?
it's altruistic in a sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. What do you think about the major impediments to awareness or understanding of the technology? Is this going to be tough to grasp?
I'll try to take a crack at that. So it depends on how you view innovation. I mean, there's a lot of things that have profoundly changed our lives, which just kind of crept up on us very gradually. You know, remember in the 1970s, we'd watch the movie like Alien. You see them video conferencing. You'd say, wow, that's the future. This is amazing. And now we have it in everything. It's in Facebook Messenger and Skype and so forth. And there was no moment you can look to and say, oh, that was the moment where we all just switched over to video. It just gradually worked its way in. So parts of our industry look very much like that. And they're going to just gradually roll into consumer products, and we'll feel the symptoms of this. For example, transactions will just get faster, wire transfers will get cheaper, credit will be more competitive, so your loans are cheaper, insurance will be more competitive. But then there are other sides which are utterly transformative, and these are going to take quite a bit of time to really get through, and that has to do with financial inclusion. So if you look at the world, you can break it into two parts. You have the 4 billion people who live in pretty good economies in terms of access to financial services. They can get a bank account, they can get a loan, they can buy a car, these types of things. But then there's about 3 billion people who have a really big hard time getting access to bank accounts. We call them unbanked. And as a consequence, they pay 85% interest on loans. They pay 15% when people send them money. For them, this is going to go from paper to a digital life. They actually get an identity. It's not a government-issued one. It's something transnational. And for the first time ever, they can start doing business on a global scale as opposed to a local scale. And there's going to be a lot of miracles that have to happen to have that occur.
I think generally what we're talking about here is cryptocurrency and money. And so adoption of like Instagram and sharing cat pictures or fancy food pictures is a lot easier for me to tell Al to download and do that. If it's a money factor, our trust kind of instincts go up, and it's a lot harder to just jump on something that's money related, especially when we have to, historically the last few years, I said this in the last panel, it's like managing your own Bitcoin wallet was like trying to fillet a blowfish, right? If you hit the wrong gland, things will go wrong. It wasn't user friendly, and yet, today wallets are getting easier to use, exchanges are getting more secure, and form factors are getting better. And the notion of being your own bank is great, but a lot of people don't understand how to do that, and the software around this stuff needs to get better, and it's improving every day. So you have lots of different dynamics between it's hard to manage, it's hard to get. You have two different narratives between the speculative narrative and then the technology adoption narrative. And then this, other narrative of, it was criminal money, and that still plays into the psyche 10 years later, 8 years later for people. That being said, it's not a question of like, is this going to happen? This is happening. This is an absolute, it's happening. But to Charles's point, as new tech comes in, whether it's PCs or internet, Skype, mobile, cloud, whatever, it goes through this like weird kind of like, how do I adopt it as a big company? Well, they're going to do private stuff on these like training wheel blockchains internally. But if you look historically, open permissionless systems always win. It won on Linux. You were seeing that in Bitcoin. And so, look, we have a lot of building to do, a lot of education, a lot of adoption to go through. But what's amazing is the types of people that are involved in this space that are building this out is incredible. I was in the early internet. I saw the kind of people that were there. This is like amazing to see who this draws from industry and government and law and what have you.
Matt, are older investors less inclined to accept this?
Generally, I think so. I think and it's psychology. Some people were like, "Hey, there was a gold standard, I think, at some point, and then there wasn't." And what backs a dollar? What backs Bitcoin? And you get into all these kind of discussions on the underlying value of these things. And when you answer that question and you say it's math, it's sometimes hard for them to digest that. It's like, well, what kind of math? And who developed the math? It's a guy named Satoshi or a girl or a group of people named Satoshi Nakamoto. Oh, who is that? I don't know. And so it's a fascinating thing. But I also say, if, I didn't know who Pythagoras was, but I know a squared plus b squared equals c squared all day long. I could bet my life on that math. Same thing with, the math of Bitcoin. So, it is hard. But again, to Charles's point, this will just be integrated. Like who says, I'm going to give you, Larry, an SMTP message? I'm going to email you, right? It's SMTP or voice over IP or TCP IP. We don't talk like that. But we're still in the days of, this is early, clunky technology that's starting to grow and grow at an incredible pace.
Now, I was given this question because I don't know what I'm talking about. And I'll ask it of Al. And then I want everyone to jump in. Justin, you follow Al. What are the major obstacles to adoption? We should talk about UX issues, private key recovery, lack of stable infrastructure. Take it away, Al.
Lucky me. So we've somewhat talked about this here. I would kind of use some different analogies. Awesome technology that is supported by awesome vision does take time. But it was the wrong time for Netflix to come on the scene. It would have failed, and so forth. So the technology needed to emerge. The user interfaces needed to be less clunky, and with time, you had acceleration of adoption. So there's things that could be done. The benefit that I think blockchain has that the internet didn't have in the 90s is that the internet exists. And so as a means to share information, it's happening at record speeds, much faster than information was being shared even in the earlier mid-90s. And so, and the ecosystem, the internet ecosystem is massive compared to the a tiny size in comparison that it was in the mid-90s. And so the rate of innovation is clearly occurring at an unprecedented pace. And so a lot of these problems that we're pointing out, some of them will get solved fairly quickly. Some will take some time. Some require education, some don't. And so, that's my skirting the maybe question directly, but to my sort of perspective as to issues around. I don't see them as issues. It's just a matter of time.
Justin, how can gear directly affect the where we're going in with the whole infrastructure and the whole environmental question? What can it do?
Well, I'll continue to kind of, I guess this will answer both that question, but also the question that you asked before in terms of obstacles out there. I think that there's a little obstacles out there in that, maybe like before the whole 2017 run, I think that maybe this whole room wouldn't have been as filled. I think that a lot of people across the world, as I'm going out on speaking a lot of stages, but also travel around to Blockchain Asia, they for example, Korea didn't even get into the market heavily until kind of summer of last year, and then really started pushing into the market. And so the biggest obstacles that we're seeing is that I think that both education and skill sets, I think that we're all kind of new in this together, except there's definitely a lot of veterans here as well. But in terms of actual skill sets and building the infrastructure that's needed, I think that we're all still learning, and I think that if we're all still learning and we're trying to force regulators and government officials to actually learn too, we're pushing them an even more accelerated time schedule than they already have, and that's causing a lot of obstacles for adoption for blockchain and crypto in the whole space. The real blockchain use cases will be invisible to the everyday user. And super easy and quick, similar to how PayPal changed a lot of industries across the world and allowed payments to go out and actually created more jobs for internet workers out there. So I think that where we're at right now, we're still in the infrastructure phase, and we need to get more cash to crypto, fiat on-ramps. We need more stability. A lot of Bitcoin and prices is very volatile, so we're going to see a lot of stable coins out there. Regulators will come in, put rules in Japan, Korea, Malta, here, as well as in the US, and so that's going to allow for more security tokens. And so, I think that we're, it's similar to what we saw in around 2011-12, where everything kind of collapsed, but still, Ethereum was being created out of that, and I think that we're still in that infrastructure phase where we continue forward, no matter whatever the market cap is, to continue forward and setting forth, whether it be for the green gear, green energy mining, or any of the projects.
Why do all the cryptocurrency people hate us? As with all things, adoption is sporadic and asymmetrical. And my parents, for example, got their first smartphone this year. 2018. My dad's a doctor. He's not a Luddite, but he just refused to have a smartphone. He had a Motorola Razr, that phone that sold in 2004, and 14 years it took him to update to it. So you have to ask yourself, which groups of people are you trying to solve problems for? And you start there. And there's a very legitimate argument that this could never be a consumer-friendly device, a consumer-friendly ecosystem. It could be just something for the governments, the enterprises, the businesses, and that alone is worth hundreds of billions of dollars because it's making their lives better. For example, IBM and Maersk have just gotten together to model global logistics and supply chains. They put a 94-company consortium together, and they're going to try to monitor where all those shipping crates are throughout the entire world. There's millions of them, billions of dollars of freight. Now, I, as a consumer, don't care about that, and I'm never going to care about that, but that's still something that is tremendously valuable to society. The hard part of the value proposition of Bitcoin is it takes a lot of the things that we take for granted, the ease of use, the consumerization, if my credit card gets stolen, there's a number I can call and somebody's going to come and bail me out, and it says, so sorry, you don't get that anymore. They take the safety scissors away, and they say you're totally in control of your own financial domain. So that means if you screw up, there's no one you can call to bail you out. Now, for a segment of the population, that is awesome. And for another segment, that's hell. And probably I would argue that the segment that's hell for is much larger than the segment that's heaven for, right? So the name of the game is saying, okay, that's where we're at, and as we start reintroducing the consumer-friendly components that allow these things to be easier to use, how do we not lose our soul in the process?
Al, what's the greatest thing about this advancement?
I'm not sure there's just one, but one, I guess in no particular order, the ability to just exchange value in a peer-to-peer manner between two people that may or may not know each other, sitting at opposite ends of the world, and for that to happen in a matter of seconds or minutes, it's just fascinating. And for to experience that for the first time is just a very interesting sensation. It's just remarkable.
How, Matt, will it help the average guy, the bus driver?
There's different segments of the world between banked, unbanked. What Al is getting at was this allows access to money networks. And money networks were always closed. You couldn't innovate on JP Morgan, you couldn't innovate on SWIFT, and now you could innovate on a new money network. And that's profound. And it also allows, again, that open permissionless systems dynamic will always win, will always punch through and come out the other end. But that access for us, and you could argue in Canada or the US, you have decent financial rails to do stuff. But at the same time, if you're a soccer mom in Brazil, a goat herder in Ghana, a taxi driver in Indonesia, you're outside particular economic advantages that other people have. You're just locked out. And you won't have that, nor will your kids have that, and it's a really debilitating thing. Here, if you have access to these new money systems, it's life-changing. And it ranks up there like life, liberty, pursuit of happiness stuff. It is really life-changing for people. And so, that invention was massive. Building Cardano is hard. And we have all this plumbing out there, but around the plumbing we need porcelain, we need finished products around it, and then once that layer gets going, then software developers will start thinking through those applications that make it easy and seamless, and this is just working underneath. It's like, I don't know how my car engine works, it just works. And so same rules apply here. We're talking very granular at these really deep, distributed, hard cryptographic systems. And that's great, but that's just kind of missing the point. It's like we got to accelerate it to see how this is going to be easier, both for that goat herder and for Charles's dad.
You want to add something, Al?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, when it's further innovations required, it boils down to not just figuring out how to package it and message it and speak in such ways that it's easier for people to understand and use and what have you. But it also boils down that at the end of the day, it's not just up to the marketer; it's the engineers that are needed, and obviously more engineering, more software code that could be banged out, and this stuff starts to happen faster. And in order for that to often happen, it's about capital, right? So the more capital that's put behind blockchain. There's a correlation there, obviously, between that and the rate of acceleration of innovation. And in some respects, blockchain has kind of helped to solve its own problem there, with the fact that we have this new way of capital formation. And as a result of that, the rate of innovation, I mean, it may have taken 10 years to get to this point, but it's not necessarily going to take 10 years to get to the next point, because there's substantially more capital now being invested in, all things blockchain.
Justin, what attracted you to this?
When I really got into space around it, it was 2011, 2012, when I started to mine with my graphics card. I was a big gamer, and so that's how I really got into Litecoin and even Dogecoin. But as I got more into the space, I wanted to see kind of the disruption of, blockchain has across different industries, and I'm learning every day in terms of how blockchain is being utilized across, shipping, logistics, to helping cannabis, to helping even healthcare, supply chain, et cetera. So my interest is really, to kind of take a look at how we can apply blockchain across all these different industries, but also, too, to create more of a collaborative environment, collaborative economy. What's been very exciting and about being in the space compared to when I was back in the more like the startup and marketing space is that we're all here trying to work together. We're all going to all around the world to other countries, and we're all working together from one common thing, which is blockchain and crypto. And so a lot of different people around the world now, and you can have teams that are decentralized too now, they're all like, this is a collaborative economy for both collaborative fundraising. If you have an idea, you can go out and actually go build it no matter where you are in the world, similar to how like Kickstarter and Indiegogo kind of changed that. Equity crowdfunding tried to do that. Then obviously ICOs and STOs are looking to do that. So that's always interesting. And then also too, I think that the biggest use case that I personally like is blockchain gaming too. So I'm a big gamer, and I think that we'll continue seeing more advancements in that space.
Charles, when people ask you, what business are you in, what do you say?
I used to say I print money for a living, and that one worked for a while. I do science and technology. The company I run is kind of a unique company where we're as much like DARPA as we are like an engineering firm, like Boeing. On the DARPA side of things, the research side of things, we try to imagine what the science of this space needs to look like. So we have labs at universities like University of Edinburgh and Tokyo Institute of Tech and other places, and we think as much about the cryptography as we do about the law and policy and the game theory, because the reality is that we're building a bunch of capabilities. And these capabilities are going to transform society, but it's not clear to me or to a lot of people exactly how it's going to change society or what we need to do to change society. So on one respect, I wear a scientist hat, and I try to imagine a different future and try to establish fact from fiction and see where that road goes. The other hat I wear is an engineer hat where I wake up every day and I try to say, well, how do we build a system that 7 billion people can use? Really hard to do. I mean, it's hard to build a system 10 people can use. I mean, much less 7 billion. It's an unbelievable scale. And how do you build a system that 7 billion people can use without cheating and introducing middlemen of necessity? Most of the evils of life, the things that caused the 2008 financial crisis or the things that cause wars or genocide, usually come from saying, well, let's trust this special group of people. We go from science to reality and actually make these things useful.
Matt, how far away are we realistically from this being part of the culture like the iPhone?
I get to meet with lots of CEOs of banks and credit card companies and financial services businesses, and I tell them that in about a decade's time, you're going to be telling the CEO in a decade's time you're going to be in front of your board saying that the center of what you do, how you make money, is now free, and that's what these systems will wind up doing is creating these new networks and new money layers to compress access and the cost of movement of money. And so I think it's going to take 5 to 10 years for this stuff to really take a bite. And we've got, like I said, there's this adoption curve, there's this usability curve, there's this regulatory curve that's coming into more and more focus as this is no longer a couple $1 billion market cap. It's now measured in $250 billion, and once it punches through $1 trillion and several trillion, regulators will take notice and try and figure out how to put this in a particular box. And so the regulatory dynamic is really important for allowing this ecosystem to thrive. At the same time, it's kind of conflicted because a lot of governments want to put all their systems on the blockchain and want to put sunlight on all their systems, which is a good thing. Money systems are going to be open now, typically controlled by governments. And so it'll be interesting to see how we transition through all that. That won't be an overnight phenomenon. That won't be slow. That won't be easy. So I think it's a decade in the making. Along the way, there's kind of two flywheels in this space. One is what we seem to focus on a lot in headlines is the speculative flywheel of crypto. And then there's the utility side of it, which is usage, transactions, throughput, and actually solving hard problems. Today, it's a speculative narrative. Bitcoin's up, Bitcoin's down, market cap's in a gully, crypto winter, it's a bloodbath out there, whatever. And I think that's overshadows all the work that's being done in terms of people building out these systems. And I think as these systems, this flywheel starts to turn, we'll see the speculative flywheel turn even further. We'll see institutional money coming in as regulatory clarity shows up. And so there's a lot of moving pieces there, so it's going to take some time. An adoption curve, I think, to see any profound impact where crypto and blockchain technology is in the tens of trillions of dollars market, it's a decade away.
Al, are we saying that nothing can stop this? It's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, Matt, I think, said it first, but I agreed with him. If we kind of look in the recent history, we had the birth of the internet. We had Internet 1.0, and there were people that would say, there was obviously first movers and so forth, but much of society said, who's going to use this? It's for kids. And so, in other words, you had first movers, willing followers, and then the unwilling followed. And then with kind of Web 2.0, social media, sharing economy, and so forth, who's going to use Facebook, Twitter for business? So you had the first movers, willing followers, and then the unwilling followed. And a lot of people kind of refer to blockchain as kind of Web 3.0. And with market forces doing what they did kind of the last two times around in those two examples, you have first movers, the willing followers, and the unwilling will follow. And what I mean by that ultimately is, in some respects, you have industries that you'll have, if we look at them holistically and you say, well, why would this industry ever do that? But if you start to look at companies within that industry and the fact that they compete with each other, and some are looking for competitive advantages, efficiencies, and so forth, is what helps make it inevitable.
Justin, will environmentalists see impact soon?
Can you repeat the
Will
question?
we see changes?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, that's, as it currently stands, there's a lot of stuff happening in terms of the environment that needs to kind of be reversed. And so we need to continue with, bring that to light, generate more awareness to that, and also just make an actual active effort in the space to kind of both reduce that and continue forward. So, I hope that we continue to see that. And, as we're seeing with, potential with blockchain, we are able to help potentially incubate other ideas too, and help foster that as well too. So, we hope and we'll continue on with making an active effort on that front.
Charles, what do you think Steve Jobs would say if he was watching this panel?
That's a really interesting question.
I knew him, and I was there when he started Apple and interviewed him, and I'm just wondering, he thought ahead. What do you think he would say?
Well, Steve had this amazing ability to understand market structure, as did Bill Gates and other people, which is one of the reasons why he was so successful. And the thing that always bothered him was that people would only focus on one thing as opposed to the whole picture. He cared as much about what the product looked like inside as he did outside, and he cared as much about how the product made you feel as what the product did. And what's magical about the cryptocurrency space is when you strip away all the jargon, the ICO, the STO, regulation, bank this, blockchain that, it's a word salad of meaninglessness. just like the computer industry was in the 1980s. Everybody was just Zilog this and VIC-20 that. It was more about, well, what is this actually about? How do we actually connect to people? And so I think that he would, if he was still alive, see a tremendous market opportunity in that we haven't directly connected this space to experiences and feelings and to human beings. We're missing the human element from the space. It's faceless, it's soulless, it's kind of cypherpunky, it's about math and these exclusive terms that the wizards get to use, but normal people can't. I think he'd probably see a tremendous business opportunity for Apple, and he'd probably find a way to integrate these types of things into his business. On the enterprise side, he has one of the largest supply chains in the world. They move hundreds of millions of products every month. Used products, new products, so forth, and that has to all be tracked. So there's a lot of innovation there. But more importantly, how can this be used to change the financial lives of people? So I'd like to believe that Jobs would probably have a good handle on that and probably would get involved in that. Because as many people don't know, he actually was involved in a lot of social questions. He got into some famous fights with Bob Dole way back, I think it was the 1970s or 80s, about charter schools and education and these types of things, and fought in the 90s about it. And he cared a lot about financial inclusion as well. In fact, that was one of the things he discussed about the iPhone, saying that once you have computation in this democratic way in everyone's hands, you're going to eventually put a bank in everybody's hands. And this is just a continuation of that.
Matt, you're going to have to educate Congress?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Are you going to have to educate Congress, the regulators?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of us on the panel here have spent time with government and meeting with three-letter agencies and Treasury and heads of state. And I mentioned this earlier. Is like, I tell them very clearly, like, I don't want to be in your office. I want to be investing and building and hiring. But I care very deeply about this space and need to engage and help you understand what this technology is and what it isn't. So this phenomenon came pretty quick over the last 12, 18 months for them to try and catch up to what's happening. It's the proverbial technology moves faster than regulation, and they don't really have a good box to put crypto in. STOs are a little different, and the ICO phenomenon, and so they need help. They need engagement. I also proudly serve as chairman of the Chamber of Digital Commerce. We're the largest trade association in the space. We launched a white paper last month on responsible token issuances, and it's really a guidebook for regulators and practitioners to have on the top right-hand corner of their desk to have a reference guide. And it's the start of that dialogue. It's an open source white paper, so people could contribute and will continue to be updated. But that's it's a really important piece of the space, and it consumes a lot of time to do that. I do want to answer the Jobs question. I think by now we'd have a hardware wallet called iCrypto. Just thinking that you would be smart enough to think about something in the space with an I in front of it. So.
Huh. All right, we have a few minutes left for each of you. Give me something, I'll start with you, Justin, that we're going to see in 10 years. Blow your mind now. It's not here now. What phenomena are we? Are we going to travel speed of light? Or what's going to happen? Something's going to happen. So what's next after this?
That's definitely a big question in terms of like the future of blockchain and impact in the world. I think that we're still so early, and I think potentially 10 years down the road, it could be where we're not even thinking about money, where we're just trading some sort of credits for our house, whether we're trading in IoT devices or rented cars. Continue to support that, or at least there's going to be more innovations and competitive advantages in that space to allow for that. So there's potential in the future where we could see a world where we're just transacting and trading some sort of assets and credits, and kind of in a more collaborative economy where we're doing some sort of task and then we're going to give it off to somebody else to do, kind of like hand off and trade off and do. So, but seeing it far in the future is so hard, especially with how everything's rapidly changing, both in the blockchain space and outside in the blockchain space too. I just hope that it still exists around, and I believe it will. I think that we'll see a whole lot of different types of projects and potentially blockchain alternatives out there that will be the next generation of distributed ledger technologies too.
Al, what do you see?
I don't know why, but the first thing that came in my mind flying cars, but
Flying cars. Why not?
teleporting.
You know what there isn't anymore? World's fairs.
No, there isn't. Yeah.
There's no World's fairs because there's nothing, I had a psychologist say, there's nothing you can show people that they would say, yeah, I get that. Because we used to go to a World's Fair with wonderment, monorail. Wow. What are you going to show them? What's a wow that's coming, Al?
What's a wow?
All right, wait a minute. Charles has a wow.
I was reading this book the other day, and they were talking about how this guy, apparently he's from Canada, so yay Toronto, but this guy created a 3D printer and using vegetable oil and a few other common ingredients can print drugs.
Print what?
Drugs, like Tylenol or aspirin or these types of things. So you can download drugs as software. And so it got me thinking, God, it's like molecular engineering at that scale where I just go to the internet, I click a button, and suddenly I can print out a pill. And
Like cocaine?
well, that's the thing. You can print out whatever you have software for.
See, that's coming. That's coming.
So that's coming, and it's actually already here with respect to some compounds. But the point of that is that the world is going from physical to digital. When we were growing up as kids, everything was physical. You go outside and play. We didn't have any of these mediums. And now we're living in a digital world where things like drugs can now be printed. Things like structures can now be printed. And it's all information. That's really exciting to me. And so the systems that control that are going to be the systems that have the big influence over our lives.
Matt, you think we'll have a machine that will deliver a pizza right into the house?
Yeah, with drones and printing drugs and printing. There's an amazing researcher in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, of all places, a guy named Anthony Atala that prints organs on a 3D printer. Creates all these. Going into his lab is like going into a Frankenstein lab. It's like everything that ails us, that kind of reaches its limit with stem cells, 3D printing of organs. I think that whole dynamic is so fascinating. That side of the equation, I feel like everything we tend to eat and all the dynamics on what's good, what's not, allergies that we know of, don't know of. I think we're just starting to figure out how to hack that side of the equation with our DNA testing and all that.
And winding it up, Al, Bill Clinton told me with the advancements in age, anybody on Earth today who's under 15, barring getting hit by a truck, will live well past 100. Buy that?
Everybody under the age of 15 past 100? We've innovated a lot of things. I mean, it's perhaps possible with more innovation that's a possibility. I would say that maybe not necessarily believe that today.
Isn't anything possible?
Anything is possible. It's just a question of when.
Star Trek is possible.
Definitely possible.
You've been wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for our panel. Al Bergio, Matt Rozak, Charles Hoskinson, and Justin Wu. Keep thinking about tomorrow, because tomorrow's what it's all about. Don't laugh at the inventor. Don't laugh at the guy who comes forward with the new idea. It's those guys who change the world, the innovators, the movers, the shakers. I'll leave you with a little joke. It has nothing to do with this battle, but it's a cute joke, and I think it's funny. By the way, it's stupid to say that. I think it's funny because if you don't laugh, I look like a schmuck, right? Okay. But I think it's funny. There's a train that goes every night from New York to Chicago. Leaves New York at midnight, gets to Chicago at 9 in the morning, all for trade. And a single woman walks in. Now, Amtrak normally would not sell a ticket to a man and a woman not married to each other traveling overnight on a train, but the woman insisted it wouldn't bother her, and she accepted. So the train begins its trek to Chicago. She gets in the lower berth, he gets in the upper berth. After a little while, the man leans over and he said, "Ma'am, I'm a little chilled. Can I borrow a blanket?" And she looks up and says, "You know, we're going to be on this train all night long. 8 hours on this train, you and I. We don't know each other before, we don't know each other after. Why not for 8 hours? Why don't we play man and wife? You and I, man and wife, for 8 hours. The guy says, sure. She says, good. Get your own goddamn blanket. Thank you very much.